I think the United States gained very little. I think it gained almost nothing. Personally, I think this is stupid. I think the war has accomplished very, very little. Somebody should support us even if we go to war and didn't tell them about it. This is a disastrous kind of policy. What is the American policy yesterday? What is the American policy today? What might be the American policy tomorrow? Now it is close to Pakistan. It is very happy with what Pakistan is doing. And when that is over, it's over.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for joining the Global Commune. It's a pleasure for us to have you. So, as we know that the U.S. foreign policy has been facing significant changes, it was the U.S. that helped the world to write the norms for the world order. But we are saying simultaneously that it's the same U.S. who is, trying to undermine, maybe intentionally or unintentionally, to undermine the same world order norms. So, what's your perspective on this?
Well, the Trump administration has made very clear that it follows what it calls the America First policy, which I'm sorry to say too often seems to mean America only or America alone, which I don't really like, but that's where they are. Um, I think there are two different currents. They're not against many of the norms, but they don't wish the what we have talked about for many years, some of these norms to impede them. In fairness to the Trump administration, they also think in many cases that other countries have utilized the so-called global norms to take advantage of the U.S. Whether you think that is true or not, that's another question. But that is a belief they have, particularly on some of the trade issues that they feel. And this is not just the so-called developing world. This is very much Europe, where they feel that uh, we America has been taken advantage of, and they are striking back. And this is something you see in many countries and many populations around the world. It's not unique to the United States. Unfortunately, the changes that it's making in the United States is one that affects a great many other countries.
So, moving to the some US foreign policies, today I was listening to Farid Zakaria. So he said that US is repeating the same mistake that British Empire did. Like US is trying to indulge in several, small strifes. Maybe it's in the Middle East, maybe it's in the Indo-Pacific. At the same time, China is leveraging its potential and energy into advancing their technological capabilities. So it seems like Farid Zakaria was, indicating towards like the fall of the US from top to down. So I was thinking about this question very deeply, but I kept that question for you. So the
Well,
analogy is
it
very, I think it's very credible, and we have to, it
it
deserves
is,
serious
you know,
attention.
it is a big and a fair question. I think it is probably too early to judge these conclusions, but it is possible because the United States is spending a lot of political capital.
Mm,
In this respect, I think it is possible. Uh, there was an interesting comparison I saw the other day, looking at the Iran war in comparison to the Vietnam War
mm,
and what it cost the United States, and making an interesting case that in the case of Vietnam, we spent a long time, a lot of money, and a lot of people got killed.
yeah.
I was a soldier there. But when we finally walked away, it didn't hurt us very much internationally. It hurt us a lot psychologically, had a long, long overhang of psychological damage. But internationally, the world sort of moved on.
mm,
In the case of the Iran war, we are damaging all kinds of, we, the Americans, are damaging all kinds of relationships.
mm,
We are damaging relationships with the Gulf states. We are damaging relations with the Europeans. We are bringing up this sort of idea that we think somebody should support us even if we go to war and didn't tell them about it and didn't ask them about it. And this is a disastrous kind of policy. So when you break that or strain or damage that many relationships, that has an importance for your policy. At the same time, the United States remains incredibly large, extremely powerful, not just militarily powerful, but economically powerful. Um, and in that respect, I think the comparison with the British Empire is probably fallacious. Uh, the British Empire made all kinds of mistakes in small wars,
mm.
didn't really cost them very much until after World War One had exhausted them. So APSA and then it was still a pretty powerful place up to World War Two, and that financially exhausted the British Empire. Uh, but it, to look at its flounderings around, did the Boer War or the second or third Afghan War really contribute much to the end of the British Empire? I don't think so. Um, so the question is valid, but the comparison, I think, is not so much valid.
Yeah, I think you were you were when you were in the Afghanistan. So it was the same time when China joined WTO. Don't you think so that it was the same US, like they squandered their energy in Afghanistan. I don't know if they got their goals, but it was the same. China, they joined WTO and they, exploited all this, liberal order like free trade, and, they developed their economy. And following my next question, I have been reading this one term again and again, like it has been like written by the Chinese, secular decline. I think they are in a fancy way. They are saying that the U.S. is, indulged in their political instability, and maybe there's some economic, slowdown. So, what do you say about this? Because these two things are relevant to each other. If we, like my previous question that I asked you, it's Chinese growth, like the unprecedented
Oh,
Chinese growth was noticed in the era when US was in Afghanistan.
oh, I don't think China was really a problem for us when I was in Afghanistan. In fact, when I was in Afghanistan, the Chinese were fairly supportive of what we were doing because they were also worried about terrorism coming out of Afghanistan. Europe, the Russians were supportive, but some of that changed later. Um, the issue of this sort of Chinese approach that the U.S. is a declining power and China is an ascending power. Um, that has been a Chinese line for quite some time. Now, I don't want to pretend to be an expert on the Chinese economy. I'm not. Uh, as I read, and I'm sure you read some of the same things, um, the Chinese are also having some major economic problems.
Yeah.
There's a huge overvaluation of their housing sector
Yeah,
and
real
the
estate.
building sector. They have maintained a lot of their economy through paying subsidies where
Mm.
issue areas of the economy that were booming on their own are not booming. And they have, under the current Chinese leadership, they have somewhat restricted the market. So China has enough economic problems that it is really premature to make this kind of analysis, I think. Second thing is one of the great strengths of America, and I say this with some pride as an American, but I'm going to, is that the American system has a great capacity to correct itself.
Mm.
And the openness of the economy has a great potential for people to figure out how to do something to move ahead. the fact that the Chinese have moved to constrict many of the free market areas of their own economy
Mm,
suggests that they are not going to have the same ability to correct their economic mistakes.
mm,
That doesn't mean one government is going to make many or more or less mistakes than the other, but that the people of the country in the United States have a much greater ability to correct the mistakes of their government by their own actions, not just by elections, than
mm.
the people of China. So this gives me a considerable confidence that we are not yet ready to write the last chapter of the American experience.
But there is one another counter argument for this. Like China is not repeating the mistakes that the US is doing. For instance, the US had the options to deal with Iran, but the recent peace deal with Iran through Pakistan, I think the goals, like the whatever they have decided, the terms and conditions, they are more or less same. So like what did US gain from this, or like 1 year long war and destroying world economy, like especially those countries who are already suffering? So what do you say about this?
You're talking about the Iran war now, or
Yeah,
the
yeah, no, Iran war, this
yeah,
recent, yeah,
the Iran war. I mean,
yeah,
the recent fight.
yeah,
I think the United States gained very little. I think it gained almost nothing.
yeah,
It destroyed a lot of Iranian military capability.
yeah,
That's a short-term gain, which it was not about to use, and which Iran was not about to use. In terms of the nuclear file, the gain, I suppose, is that by destroying a lot of facilities, it will take Iran more time and more money to rebuild them. But in terms of the longer term goal, the negotiation of really giving up any potential for a nuclear weapon, I would say that the United States was in a better position before the war
yeah,
when there were things being offered and when we had more effective economic pressure on Iran. Now, at the end of the war, the United States is taking off the economic pressure.
mm,
So it has less pressure, less leverage with Iran than it had before the war. Um, yeah, personally, I think this is stupid, but I'm not in my government anymore. So I think the war has accomplished very, very little. In fact, it has made a number of things worse. The Straits of Hormuz we are supposed to be open. We don't know if they're open. We don't know if Iran will have more control than it had before. That was not in question before the war. The
mm,
question is because of the war.
yeah,
With the Arab Gulf states, we had a situation where they looked to us for security, but they thought that security was in terms of defense against an Iranian attack. They never thought that our actions would lead the Iranians to attack the Gulf states. In other words, the very security we gave also became a source of danger.
yeah,
Um, that now leaves a very difficult environment in which we are still important to Gulf state security. They can't really manage these threats without us. And at the same time, we're a problem. And that makes this whole situation more unstable than it was before. So when you look at those things, and then when you look at the effect on the world economy, to me, the balance sheet is very negative for the United States for foreign policy.
yeah. There is one another argument in the same scenario. Like Iran used to only, like they used to say only this, that we will this close Strait of Hormuz. But now with Trump's foreign policy that they attacked Iran, they have now even showed it practically. So what do you say about this? Is it a mistake or a miscalculation?
Yeah, it's a mistake. It's a
Yeah.
stupid mistake because it was clear what they would do. Now, there are ways the United States can militarily open the straits, but they mean you have to take greater risk. You end up with troops on the ground. So it's not cheap. The other thing is, without a war, the Iranians had no incentive to try to close the straits. Now, I think one can exaggerate
Mm.
how much they have gained because were they to just reach out in a future crisis and close the strait, they would also potentially trigger the same kind of attack. And while they have survived very well politically, they have lost a great deal economically.
Mm.
And I think you have to be very one-sided to see that to think they have gained without also losing a great deal.
Yeah,
They
but
have they have things which will deter them from closing the strait in the future.
yeah, but basically it's like Iran also lose too much, like suffer too much economically due to the closure of Strait of Hormuz. But
Hmm?
now Iran also understand this, that we can also use this as a tool to squeeze US or maybe to pressurize US. If you do X, we will do this
No,
closure of Strait of Hormuz. So that this has been testified. So this even gave confidence to the Iranian leadership, who are more hardliners than their predecessors.
well, I think you're right. Exactly how much confidence, I don't know, because the Iranians are very good at pretending. But I mean, pretending for diplomatic purposes.
Yeah.
I have great respect for them. I spent 3 years living in Iran before the revolution, but I would say you should not take them completely at their word. I mean, they
Mm,
are acting like they have lost nothing and gained much. They have gained. They have
mm,
also lost much. And so they are hiding that behind their public appearance.
mm.
But overall, they have gained.
So, what do you say about Israel? US supported, unconditionally Israel in this all throughout this, US Israel history. What do you say recently? I think 2 or 3 days ago, I was listening to GD Vance. He was saying that, Israel has to think very carefully because it's the only US that they rely on. What do you say about this? Is it something, to pressurize the Israel to comply the new peace, deal, or like what do you think about Israel? Because Israel openly, rejects some of the conditions in the recent memorandum, and I think many authors and intellectuals, they are calling Israel to be a spoiler of this whole thing. So, you know like what's the US foreign policy towards this whole issue? Because Israel can do something very unprecedentedly, maybe something in Lebanon, and attacking any Iranian leadership again, and anything can happen. So it's a major, it will be a very major pushback to the US foreign policy.
Well, these days with Mr. Trump, you have to ask what is the American policy yesterday? What is the American policy today? What might be the American policy tomorrow? It moves around a lot. I think you can separate some elements. There is still a very, very strong element of support in America for Israel. I do not think you will have any kind of fundamental break. There is increasing criticism of the Netanyahu government.
Mm,
There is a certain amount of breaking between support for Israel and support for the Netanyahu government. For many people, it's one thing. They find any separation is not acceptable as support for Israel, but it's changing. The weight of things is changing. How far it will change, it's too early to say. Right now, you have a lot of words flying around.
mm,
And so you had, as you said, Vice President Vance criticizing Israel. Well, now you've had some of the Republicans in Congress are already complaining about that and pushing back against him. At this point, words are cheap.
mm.
And so you've got a lot of people talking.
Actions are.
There's no particular action. Now, the Iranians are leveraging the agreement to have the United States do the work of putting pressure on Israel. I don't know how far that will work. Um, and Mr. Trump wants to end this war, so he might do some of that, but there's probably limits. So it's really very early to see. You have to wait for actions before you can really judge. You can see that there is a potential for, there's certainly a potential for strain. Does it matter? Will it change the amount of money the United States gives Israel? Will it change the weapons? Will it change Israeli policy in Lebanon or in the West Bank? So far, not, but we'll see.
So given, sorry for this, given Trump's, capricious, like mindset, especially, regarding foreign policy, I was confused about something. At the one end, Trump is, administration is saying that priority is to, improve the Americans' life, like, American first approach. But at the same time, they have, massively increased their, I think, budget for their some military defense companies. So I'm really confused about this. Like, what does this indicates?
You are not alone in being confused. Uh, but
Like
when
this
you
money
search,
could have
I,
been given to healthcare. There is a major, healthcare issue in the US, like, and it should be given to the school and education. But why the military? Like it was something very unprecedented. So it was not like something normal initiative. Like I have seen this, argument in a very several important forums. Like from, if you take any, serious forums, they were discussing the same point because everyone is worried about like what was the purpose. Like there is one another argument, the integration of AI into foreign policy. Like as we know, uh, like the tech, owners, CEOs, they are, into US administrations, like in one way or other way, indirectly, they are, influencing the US administration, maybe for their own, benefits, or maybe for the all the US. Does this was like my whole point here is the increased in this budget was just to some political actors to so that they can benefit, or just this for some other purpose.
you're talking about the increase in the defense budget.
Yeah, because this argument is linked with these tech guys.
Uh, the AI question is one thing, which I don't really have an opinion on. That I don't have enough facts to have a solid opinion. The defense budget, this is a reflection of something that's been going on for some time. The defense budget, or the condition of our defense, is not where it needs to be.
Mm.
We do not have all of the defense mechanisms that the Ukrainian war has shown us we could need. Uh, we have allowed the Navy to decrease. Now, the question is, when you list all the things we need, then can you afford them?
Mm.
This is one of those questions where politicians like to spend money more than to save money by cutting anything. Um, so you have a huge defense increase, which many defense specialists say is necessary to make up for what we have not done in the past, where we were busy funding wars. But at the same time, it conflicts directly with some of the necessary economic policies. All I can tell you is that's normal politics. It's not logical, but politicians are great on promises, they're great on spending, and they're very low and unwilling when it comes to cutting anything that's a benefit to people. So that's where you are.
So I think I have one very personal question to ask you. Like I was thinking about this, and I really wanted to, ask from someone sitting in the Washington DC.
Hmm.
Do you think US-Pakistan relations, like, it has been like roller coaster. Sometimes it is very high, and sometimes it is very low. So when it was Afghanistan, Pakistan was very relevant. But now, from the last 2 years, Pakistan is again, uh, gain
Yeah,
very importance in
or
DC. But basically, I'm asking, is this relationship with the US sustainable, or do you think after Trump, or maybe with the importance of like when the rare earth metals importance, they didn't like when the US find itself their rare earth metals from other countries. Do you think that the US and Pakistan's relations will go like decline, or basically I'm asking about the sustainability of these relations.
with
Bromance,
Mr.
yeah,
Yeah,
bromance between
it's perfectly good question, but with Mr. Trump, the question usually is, "What did you do for me lately?"
mm,
So, if you haven't been doing something lately, then he's not as happy with you. Um, the there is a mix of issues here. The United States has moved closer to Pakistan. At the same time, there are many in the United States who have a deep anger at Pakistan for the support it gave the Taliban
mm,
during the war in Afghanistan.
yeah,
There is a strong, on the one hand, there's tension here between different things that exist at the same time, right?
mm,
And when you try to see them as only one thing, I think you make yourself confused. So on the one hand, you have the fact that the United States has a real interest in counterterrorism. It has a real interest in stability in Central Asia, which is endangered by actions from coming out of Afghanistan, not just the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, but also the various other groups, Uyghurs, Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, and so on. So the United States has an interest there in supporting Pakistan. At the same time, you have many, maybe not right now in the Trump government, but maybe in definitely elsewhere in the United States government, who feel like, well, Pakistan, you made this problem. You supported the TTP, and now you supported the Taliban, and now they're giving rise to the TTP. And we told you for 20 years that was going to happen, and you wouldn't listen to us.
mm,
And now you're reaping what you have sowed. And so, that's kind of too bad for you.
mm,
But these things are in tension because, on the one hand, there are people who sort of like to see Pakistan
mm,
taking a hit from Afghanistan because they feel that Americans died in Afghanistan because of Pakistani support for the Taliban. At the same time, we have real interests in supporting Pakistan. We have real interests in controlling terrorism. Pakistan is a major country, can't just be let to have troubles without help. And so you have a tension that is pulling things in different directions at the same time. And then in the middle, you have an administration, the Trump administration, which is very tactical. So right now, it is close to Pakistan. It thinks they're wonderful. It is very happy with what Pakistan is doing in mediating in the Iran war. And when that is over, it's over.
yeah.
it its ability to leave a long debt that the Trump administration will pay, I
Mm.
think, is very small.
It
Does
does,
that help you, or
yeah,
does that just confuse you more?
yeah. So yeah, there is one another question. Is it possible for the US to maintain relations both both with the US and sorry, India and Pakistan, because US has to choose India or
The
Pakistan.
U.S. will
I'm
not choose.
No,
They,
I'm
they,
bringing another argument. If US is if US wants to, support India just to counter China, like this is something, American dream in this dream exists in American. But there is another argument. The Indians say we have our own strategic autonomy. We will not, counter Chinese. Uh, so what do you think about this? If the US wants to, get their dream of countering China through India, will they sacrifice Pakistan?
Will it drop Pakistan? What you're asking me, I think, is will it drop
Yeah.
Pakistan
Is
to
will
go with
drop or
it?
is it possible for
No.
the US to maintain with
Look,
both?
this this has been a problem now ever since partition of India.
Yeah,
Uh, the United States tries to keep a foot in both, a balance between both countries. It has solid interests in both countries.
yeah.
At one time, the interests tilt one way, at another time, they tilt the other way. The United States is not going, I do not believe it will ever make a choice of one over the other. It will continue to try to balance, and
I'm not saying the like
Pakistanis and Indians will live in continual frustration and fantasies and dreams about how the policy might change or nightmares.
so I think like whatever I have studied and read the history, like US Pakistan history, like I read this and and like there are different literature available on US Pakistan foreign policy. One might be from the written by Western, authors, and one is from Pakistani. But if you study the literature that is written by Pakistanis, you will find a very, gloomy and lugubrious picture of the US, that how they, like
Yeah, how
sometimes
the
they were very
U.S. has
loyal,
been,
sometimes they were
the
very,
U.S. has betrayed Pakistan. The U.S. was an ally, and then it put on the house the embargo of the
yeah.
F-16s. It's
So
what
there
I
is,
said, but this is what I said. It goes up and down. It depends on interests, and it is not going to make a fundamental change one way or the other that just lasts forever.
so it is possible for Trump or maybe new leader to engage both Modi and Asim Munir, or maybe some our future
Certainly, it is certainly possible. Whether it will, how successful it will be is a different question. But the idea, you need to get out away from the idea that the U.S. will make one choice and stick to it.
yeah, I wish I could see this moment, and thank you so much for joining
No,
TGC.
you're most welcome. It was an enjoyable conversation for me. I hope it was useful for you.
Yeah.